When I sold Cottage Link Rental Management in 2022, we were running at 85% direct bookings. That didn't happen by accident. We'd been at it for 20 years, booking direct long before Airbnb was even a concept. For most property managers, though, direct booking remains one of the hardest things to build. Guests arrive through the OTAs, they stay, they leave, and you're left with almost nothing you can use to bring them back. That's the gap today's sponsor, Stayfi, is designed to close. And I'll be telling you more about them later in the episode. This is the Vacation Rental Success Podcast, keeping you up to date with news, views, information and resources on this rapidly changing short-term rental business. I'm your host, Heather Bayer, and with 25 years of experience in this industry, I'm making sure you know what's hot, what's not, what's new, and what will help make your business a success. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Vacation Rental Success Podcast. This is your host Heather Bayer, and as ever I'm super excited to be back with you once again. Back in the 1990s, when I rented out my very first property in Canada while I was still living in England, I talked to every single guest when they booked. I wanted to know why they'd chosen that destination. Why do you want to go to Canada? Why did you choose this particular property out of everything else available? And what were they expecting from the week? And I also wanted to know what it would take for them to leave at the end of the week saying it had been the best holiday of their life. And I remember one answer from a guest. She said they were bringing their 8-year-old son, and he'd never been fishing before. She'd asked the question about whether it was safe to fish, and I was able to reassure her on the phone that it was safe. He would have an amazing time fishing, and that it was almost guaranteed he would catch a fish. I knew this because I'd seen kids fishing off our dock before, and they caught multiple sunfish in a very short period of time. And for this little boy, it didn't matter what sort of fish it was. It didn't matter. It didn't need to be a walleye or a bass or something else, the sort of thing an angler would know about. But he just wanted to catch a fish, and I knew he could. Armed with that information, and knowing they were coming from England, we bought an inexpensive fishing rod. And along with the fishing tackle box that we already had for our guest to use, he was going to be really well equipped from the moment he arrived. As an added bonus, which you may not all agree that this was a bonus, but it was for them, we bought a tub of worms and wrapped it in several plastic bags and left it in the fridge with a big label on it, live worms. It's just something you might not do for every guest. But having had that conversation, we knew it was the right thing to do. And it definitely was. We heard back from the guests at the end of their stay that it was the best vacation they'd ever had. Their son had caught multiple fish. They'd sat around the fire pit at night. They told us they'd seen the Milky Way and taught their son about constellations and planets. So that was easy enough for one property. It got a lot harder once we scaled into property management because you simply can't have that depth of conversation with every guest when you're managing dozens or hundreds of them. So in talking to my guest today, Orlie Benjamin, I learned that AI is finally giving operators a way to build that picture back at scale without losing the human part of it. She built her company after running her own rental near Hocking Hills, Ohio, and discovering that the platforms we all book through are built to keep an operator and guest apart and not bring them together, and mostly we know this. So we talk about what it actually looks like to know an incoming guest before they ever arrive, why the fees that you're paying Airbnb have quietly become a much bigger number than you think, and why more properties doesn't automatically mean a more sophisticated business. Here's my conversation with Orlie Benjamin of Lasoh.com. So I'm so grateful and happy that a lot of people asked me to have Orlie Benjamin on the show. And I don't know why I have not done this before, but I'd like to say a big, warm welcome to her. Orlie Benjamin from, is it Lasoh.com?
Correct.
Okay,
It's
I got it right.
Lasoh.io.
Oh,
Can't get it .com
Lasoh.io.
anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining me, Orlie. It's a huge pleasure to have you here.
Heather, thanks so much for having me. I can't wait to chat with you. We're going to have a fun conversation, I can tell.
We are. So where are you dialing in from today?
I'm dialing in from Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, not so far from us here up in Ontario. Did you get some of our smoke?
We did. It felt like a Mad Max movie for 2 days, which was really weird. I can imagine it was only worse for you.
It was, to me, it was just like wearing a really cheap pair of sunglasses. I looked out the window, I thought, have I got sunglasses on? And I thought, did I get them from Walmart? But no, it's just one of those things, comes and goes. And happily, now it's gone. So we're in cooler temperatures now. So that's the price you have to pay.
I'm very happy that it's passed. I'm sure it's a huge impact to everyone in Canada. And it's terrible. It seems to be a recurring topic that every summer now that we're getting these fires.
I know. And I was thinking about people on vacation. As always, when we get something like this, it's like the weather we have this week. It was gorgeous last week. And it's been 4 years since I managed my property management company. And the weather was such a huge factor. Everybody wanted good weather. Of course you do. And last week we had beautiful temperatures and I was swimming every day. And I was just thinking how fabulous it is. This morning it's 60 degrees. It's cool. We can't win them all, but it certainly got me thinking about guests. And that's really the topic of this conversation. But I want to kick off by asking you just to share your journey here to the short-term rental world, because everybody comes at it from different directions. I just recorded an interview this morning with, and do you know Richard Vorton?
I've only met him once. Humorously, I was also at the dog park when he and I took our call, but it was a lovely conversation about a year ago.
Did you know he was a microbiologist?
I did not know that.
Yes, and he worked extensively in that field for many years and only sold his company in, I think, 2003. Was it 2003? Can't have been 2023. But 2003, I think he sold his company and went into short-term rentals. And it's just like, okay, that's probably one of the most extreme examples I've heard of career hopping. But yours is pretty good too. So give us the backstory of Orlie.
I've reformed my career a couple of times. I am a licensed attorney who chose to move my way into business instead of law. So I call myself a reformed attorney. I also call myself a reformed corporate employee. So I worked in a lot of large corporations for a majority of my career. And I stumbled across entrepreneurship and venture capital in my last corporate stint. And that's when I completely had a light bulb moment that I was in the wrong place and I needed to pivot into a more entrepreneurial environment. I had always had this dream of having a cabin in the woods nearby. We rented often at an area near where I live called Hocking Hills. And during the overlap of my exposure to entrepreneurship and venture capital, COVID happened and the world shut down. And the place I loved to rent actually sold out in 30 minutes. And my first response was that I got mad. I'm like, where are we going to rent? We need to get into the woods and away from our urban living environment. And then I recognized, hey, that's the wrong question. The wrong question is, why am I not doing this? And so it was February of 21 when they sold out their whole year. And I made the decision very quickly that I was going to do it. And by April, we were in contract on 78 acres of land. And I concurrently worked in a W-2 steady employment while building the side hustle of design building a vacation rental business. And then it really started having guests in 2023.
Wow. I love that. I love that. And I love the story of choosing Hocking Hills and why. And I mean, part of this is because my area is rural Ontario. It is only 2 hours north of Toronto. But you can be so totally out in the bush, on a lake, just on water and with the sounds of frogs and other critters in the background. That to me is absolute magic. So I can understand your draw to somewhere like that. And it's interesting because I mentioned this to you when we had our initial chat, that I explored Hocking Hills for a while a couple of years ago when I was looking for material for a presentation I was doing on niche marketing. And one of the areas was bird watching and getting out in nature. And Hocking Hills came up as one of the fastest growing locations in the US as a destination for nature.
that's exactly why it was appealing to me and my family. And also, I think appealing as a business model. It's a drive to destination. I'm actually shocked by how far some people drive. We get guests from 6, 7, 8 hours away at times. And my corporate experience was all in marketing. So of course I over construct the approach to my vacation rental business, but my sort of mission statement focus was disconnect to reconnect, because we're in such a increasingly overwhelming technological world. And sometimes we just need to go get barefoot in grass and talk to people without any devices. And that was really the goal of creating that space for my family and creating it for my guests, which was, I found a new need that is, as our world gets more crazy, we need to be able to go slow down and recharge.
Yeah, that's interesting. So getting guests to disconnect. I know with our business model, we used to do that. You say, come up to Ontario's cottage country and you probably won't find a cell signal.
Well, I do provide Starlink internet, because if they need to connect, they need to connect. But hopefully they're having such a good time they choose not to.
Yeah, exactly. I think there is that need. I remember when my kids were young, we used to take them to Italy, to a tiny little campsite near Lake Como for 3 weeks every single summer. And we'd drive down there, and we had no cell phone. We had no means of connection with the outside world apart from the payphone on the campground, which rarely worked. And I remember think now, my gosh, we went away, we left home, we left my dog with my parents, and off we went. And I didn't even think about them until we arrived back in England 3 weeks later. And how different it all is now.
I'm sure that was really magical, though, right? We're so distracted. The whole technology ecosystem is around the attention economy. And whether it's notifications on your phone or phone calls or texts, it's very overwhelming. At some point, we need a break. So I'm sure it was very magical to actually live in the moment, which very few people get to do.
I remember it so well. My kids who are now, they're parents of teenagers, and they're watching their teens growing up and thinking, I would like to just take them away from their devices for 10 minutes, let alone a day or a week or 3 weeks as we used to do it. But that sort of brings me to what I want to talk to you about, because before I do that, tell me about Lasoh and what it's about and why you decided to go into that.
So I guess the second half of my origin story here is, once I operationalized my business, it was very clear to me that the tools that I was exposed to in, Fortune 500 marketing organizations literally didn't exist in this industry. And so I had all these wishes around what I could do, but there was no tech stack to do it. And I then had a similar moment, which is, don't get mad. This is an opportunity, right? Just like the moment of the Airbnb experience selling out in 30 minutes for my favorite cabin. So what I recognized is that there's a really underserved industry that's incredibly dependent on distribution channels for guest acquisition that is at risk, because if you don't own your guest, you don't own your business. And also, not only is there a problem around not having guest data, there's a problem around not being able to nurture the relationship with guests to reactivate revenue and drive repeat bookings and increase revenue per stay. I've worked in both hospitality and e-commerce businesses such as Victoria's Secret, American Airlines, NetJets, which is a private jet company owned by Berkshire Hathaway. And I also spent some time at Disney. So these are all blended with each other with a balance of e-commerce and hospitality. But the formula we always talked about at Victoria's Secret is that the way you make money is the number of customers you have times the number of times they transact times the average spend per transaction. You multiply those three things and that's revenue. And so we always viewed each of those things as a lever. And so the first and biggest lever is how many guests or customers do you have? And then how do you start nurturing each one of those guests to spend more and come back more often? And before you know it, you have a recurring revenue model, which is pretty amazing.
Tell me more about getting to know your guests and making them come back, nurturing that relationship. So in the introduction to this, I told a story about way back 25 years ago when I had my first property out here in Canada, and I was still living in England, and I wanted to get to know my guests, and because I just had the one property. So I'd get on the phone with them and I'd ask them all these questions about why they'd chosen us and what they wanted. And my biggest question was, if you went away at the end of your vacation, what would it take for you to say this was the best vacation ever? And those answers were just magic. And the story I told was the guest who said she had an 8-year-old son and she wanted him to learn to fish because he was desperate to fish. So I took that information and provided the fishing rod and even put worms in the fridge for them when they arrived, which is not obviously what everybody would want to do, but it worked. It really worked for this person. She said at the end it was the best vacation she'd ever had because her son had caught multiple fish. That's all he did every day, was take a little fishing rod that we provided, took the worms, and he went and fished off the dock, and he would catch multiple little sunfish. And that was a memory he's probably holding to this day, 20 odd years later. I'd love to get in touch with him and say, you learned to fish in Canada. Do you remember this? But I also very much aware, we grew to, when I started a property management company, we grew to 200 properties. It was tough to continue to nurture that relationship from the outset and get that information that would enable us to make that uniqueness happen. But this is what you can do with Lasoh. And I want you to give me some examples of that one, because I'm sure you have plenty of how you nurture relationships with guests.
Absolutely. But actually, to your point, it starts with understanding the intent of the trip. And so the way our product works is we have 3 products. The first is a guest portal, and that is all about elevating the guest experience in a scalable way while also using it as a mousetrap for data so that you know as much as you can about the guest through observed as well as inquired information in a way, again, that's scalable, right? Because it's very easy to do it a couple of units and it's very hard to do it dozens or hundreds of units. And all of that data then drops into the CRM that we've built. And the CRM that we have lives in both products. So the CRM comes with the guest portal. We also have a secondary product that we have called Smart Marketing because it's an AI native marketing solution. So it has the CRM in it, but it also has email messaging, text messaging, and AI native segmentation and grooming. And so the whole point of the guest portal is know as much as you can about who they are, because the better you know your guests, the more you can delight them. And it's a lot easier to remarket a customer that's had an amazing experience. The easiest thing to market is a great product, and the product here is the experience. So the guest portal is designed to set up that guest to be successful, have everything they need to know from the point of booking to the point of leaving, but also use that opportunity and that relationship building in the pre-arrival journey as a data capture opportunity, including getting the marketable contact information from other guests, not just the booker guest. With that information, you then have this phase 2 product, which is how do you now take that data and that intention and how do you turn it into revenue? And we really think about what we're doing as actually providing an AI marketing team more than just a software. It's a bit of a hybrid model, and actually software is moving in this direction, right? Mm-hmm. Everything is people, systems, and process. But what's happening now is really good software is actually reducing the load on people, because your traditional software requires a person to completely operate it. That person needs to know what they want and what they want to do. We've flipped the script in our marketing, which is why we're calling it Smart Marketing. The A stands for agentic, and SMART is an acronym. And we actually pre-design campaigns that are very known to be high ROI, everything from abandoned cart to stay-anniversary to happy half birthday to re-engagement campaigns. And we've pre-built the design, we've pre-built the trigger. We have custom data fields that you don't have in your PMS and you wouldn't have in a more traditional CRM like a HubSpot, because they're unique data architecture for our industry, which is what's missing. And if you love everything we've done, you can just hit play and launch the campaign or continue the automation, depending on, we have 2 types. One is a proactive campaign. The second is an automation. And if you want to customize a little bit, you have that option too. You may want to change the photo, change the language, but everything's designed to be branded for the operator's business because we're essentially a white label solution. So we're really, I like to think of it as democratizing marketing, right? Because we're making marketing easy by really setting a lot of the things that I even hate doing about marketing into a repeatable system so people can get to the outcome faster without having to do all of the nitty gritty.
You said a number of things that you said that sort of triggered me off a bit. One was you said mousetrap. So tell me more about that. What sort of information are you capturing in this process? And I can guess how it's used, but for me, going back to my story about the little boy and fishing, just give you one more story, and I've told it loads of times on this podcast because it was one of my huge failures as a property manager. Well, in fact, as a homeowner, because it was my own cottage, that because my cleaner was telling me she didn't like to make the bunk beds, I decided I would really make her life easier. I would separate out the bunk beds and make the bunk bedroom into a twin-bedded room until I got the call 4:10 on a Saturday afternoon when our guests go in at 4:00, and at 4:10, I got the call and I could hear the wailing in the background of this woman saying, "I've arrived, where's the bunk beds?" Because I told my son this is going to be his very first experience of being in a bunk bed, and that's what sold the property to me. And it's something, this is probably 17 years ago. I've never forgotten that huge error. But she would have probably told me that if I'd said to her, tell me about, choosing this location, choosing this property. She probably would have said, I chose it because it had bunk beds. So that's what I'm getting at. Is that the sort of information that you can collect from guests?
It is. I would break it down to both qualitative and quantitative types of information, right? So there's really nice structured data that we can capture, such as their address, which then gives you sort of geographical distance. Are they driving? Are they flying distance? Yada, yada. But we also have in the guest portal, what we have is a series of sort of pre-arrival messages that have been designed. And one of them, and it's all intended to be really all about creating human connection, right? A lot of technologies around operations and efficiency. This is actually technology in the name of humanity. But this particular message goes out, and the template, which anyone can change, is, hey, we really want to make your stay amazing. We'd love to know a little bit more about why you're coming so that we can actually provide you with recommendations on what to do and make sure your stay is great. And the way that works is that's sent out via text or via email. Now, if somebody comes in from Airbnb, you have their phone number. If it comes in from a direct booking, you might have both. And they go into the guest portal and they fill out a form. And actually, it was fun with the product team. We had this whole debate because the engineers wanted to make it really slick and really pretty. And this whole select your favorite things, very designed. And I was like, no, this needs to be a form. And it needs to be like 3 questions. And it needs to be very free text because it needs to feel like there's a human on the other side who's getting that information and then doing something with that information. So the questions are like, are you coming for a special occasion? And there's a drop down, which some of them are pre-selected to make it easy, but then there's an other field. And then the other question is, tell us a little bit about why you're coming and anything you're looking forward to. And then tell us a little bit about your group. And it's so open-ended that we get everything from, I have celiac and I'm really stressed about what am I going to do in terms of restaurants because I don't want to impact the group, but I don't want to get sick, to, so that's this individual sort of point of view, to other folks who are really thinking on behalf of the overall group. And they're like, tell me what to do. And what we've done, because anytime you ask a question, it's actually worse to do nothing when you get information than it is to have never asked. We have created this very similar to like how ChatGPT would respond to a question. We've created this pre-built response based off of the context, but all that context gets saved in the CRM associated with that specific contact. So now our AI team now knows that information and can build segments and build context around who they are because we have this qualitative information. And then in that specific instance, what happens is the pre-designed reply is reviewed by the operator. And what the operator has done is, in part of the onboarding process, is they've put together recommendations of places to eat and things to do. And it's all done through a Google API. So it's very easy to onboard to. Once you put together your favorites, which all of us are repeatedly saying the same thing. So once you systematize that, it injects it into the response. You review it if you're okay with it, but it's more of a sanity check versus writing it from scratch. And now you've delighted your guests before they ever show up, and you know a lot more about them.
Yeah, that is the AI version to putting worms in the fridge.
except for the AI agent can't actually do anything with worms because it has no hands. So there's still a lot of value in humans doing things.
I'm so glad there's still a lot of value for humans. Steve Schwab mentioned something a while back about just a story he had about how he's empowered his team down in Mexico to do exceptional things. And it's because their time is being freed up, because AI is freeing up their time from all the repetitive stuff and allowing them to be creative and to do exceptional things. So he said, you don't fire 9 people. Instead, you give 9 people the scope to be exceptional. And for anybody who's read Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara, that is this whole business of creating dreams. But you're giving people the scope to do that because there is AI out in the background doing this core stuff that I used to get on the phone and talk to guests about. But so how do they feel? How do people feel about being asked these questions? Because I'm sure they know. Do they know it's an AI generated?
It doesn't feel agentic at all. It's like a survey. It's actually very unsophisticated and it's designed on purpose. And so it's 3 questions. And then there's like an automatic, like once you've completed the survey, it's just like our team will be getting back to you in the next couple of days once we've had the opportunity to read your responses. Because the reality, the team does need to read the context and it does need to review what the AI agent has written for them. The distinction is that we've taken some of the steps that are work out of the process so that they can do the thing that matters, which is provide the critical point of view. The process of asking, the process of capturing, the process of writing a draft response, that's 3 out of 4 steps. And so if you can get 3 out of 4 steps out of the way and allow the exceptional part to exist, which is let me just make sure this is right and sprinkle a little extra flair, then now they've done exactly what you're describing with Steve, which is they've been freed up to do more with the amount of time they have because the time is being allocated by AI agents to do the things that are very time consuming and repeatable and don't require as much of the critical thinking. And so the work gets smarter when you take some of the less sophisticated, more repeatable work off the plate of the person.
Our sponsor, StayFi, is built on a fairly simple idea. The guest who found you on Airbnb the first time doesn't have to come back through Airbnb the second time, as long as you have their email address and something worth sending them. I could keep explaining that, but it carries a lot more weight from someone who's been doing it in a real business for 4 years. This is Mike Springer, the owner of Book Nola.
Hey, this is Mike Springer, the owner of Book Nola. And in the over 4 years we've been using StayFi, it's become a foundational piece in our guest marketing and direct booking success. Since implementing StayFi, we've been able to collect over 18,000 guest emails and seen our direct bookings grow tenfold. In a world where OTAs are clamping down on sharing guest data and hiking platform fees, it's more important than ever to own your relationship with your guests, and that includes owning your guest data. From simplifying guest data collection and curating a branded Wi-Fi experience for our guests, to an easy-to-use dashboard and amazing support, StayFi is a no-brainer for anyone in the vacation rental space looking to increase their direct bookings.
18,000 email addresses, collected from guests who are already walking through the door. What I find most interesting about StayFi is where those addresses come from. When one person in a booking party logs onto the Wi-Fi, so does everyone else staying in the house, and StayFi captures all of them, rather than just the name on the reservation. For a group booking, that's 4 or 5 contacts instead of 1, and you never had to ask for a single one of them. You've already done the hard part, getting those guests through the door. StayFi is about being able to reach them again. Check them out at stayfi.com. Give me some examples. What people are telling you, what guests are telling you that maybe are a little bit off the wall or uniquer, and how would operators then take those and actually do something with it?
That example I talked about with celiac is a perfect example, right? And that's like a really vulnerable thing for someone to divulge. It's also like a very stressful aspect around their vacation that if you can remove the stress, and by the way, the AI agent can go and read the menu of every recommended restaurant nearby and actually have enough intelligence to say, I recommend these things and these meals. And to me, that was more of an edge case, the celiac incident. And she responded afterward, and she was so thankful to have not felt like a burden to her group and also to feel safe on vacation because she's worried about getting sick. And so it's almost, whether it's the bunk bed story or the fishing story, like everyone who's going on vacation has an underlying set of details that matter for that trip. And if you can uncover some of those details and know what you're solving for, you can meet them where they're at in a way that goes from great to exceptional. And at the end of the day, vacations are incredibly emotional things. Like we all work really hard and then we live for a little bit of time on these vacations. And so they have a lot of gravitas in terms of the impact and the weight that we put on them emotionally. I read something once that was 50% of the joy of vacation is anticipating it, right? So there's a lot of emotional validation that's tied up in that. And if you can just exceed expectations through these nuanced moments, it's really easy to get that person to come back. And it's really easy to also, if something goes wrong, you have this goodwill from them. That was something we talked about in NetJets a lot. It was called the goodwill piggy bank. And so we actually had custom software. Everything at NetJets was custom because there's really no one else doing the business like how NetJets does. But it would actually look for signals around satisfaction and dissatisfaction across a variety of different trips on planes. And the idea of the goodwill piggy bank is if you have enough things go right before something goes wrong, the thing that goes wrong is at the end of the day, like it's permissible because you've deposited so much goodwill in the piggy bank that there's enough of a equity of goodwill to withdraw from. But if you start at neutral, which in most instances before showing up to a trip, most people are at neutral. They don't have goodwill. And then something goes wrong immediately, then you don't have any goodwill to withdraw on. And now you have a deficit on goodwill. You're now playing defense instead of, you're in the red.
We used to have an expression in our company, it was called pre-soured, that people weren't nurtured enough before they arrived. And then maybe had one minor negative incident before they got there. Then they were pre-soured. They were arriving in a negative state. And a couple of things you said there that had an impact. One was, and I think this is the area so many operators forget, is the anticipation phase. When people are talking about the 7 stages of the guest experience and you've seen the dreaming stage when you're thinking about it, and then there's the booking stage, and then the confirmation stage, and then arrival. And I'm thinking, you've missed out this massive
Anticipation. And it's probably the longest stage if you want to talk about days.
Yes. Yeah. And I know me personally, I usually enjoy the anticipation more than I actually enjoy the vacation.
Because you're dreaming and you're fantasizing about something amazing.
Yeah. And it's such an open area to capitalize on. People, I think, miss this out. And I can see that collecting information earlier on, when they've just booked and said, okay, you've booked now, give me the information so I can make your experience even better. And then you've got that content, that data to then start feeding them over time between that confirmation. And then, was it Andy McNulty called it what are those round things that go down deserts? The vegetation that rolls down an old...
Tumbleweeds.
That's the one. So Andy McNulty, who founded TouchStay, called it tumbleweed time because it's just this empty space that just doesn't get filled. So I'm really glad you mentioned the anticipation stage. I hope people really pick up on this and understand that they've got this massive opportunity.
The entire point of the guest portal, and by the way, anything before arrival is considered operational messaging. So you don't have to have an opt-in via text message to send them messages. And you don't have to have an unsubscribe feature like you do in sort of the real solicitation phase, which would be any time that's not operational. But the entire point of the guest portal and the journey that we've pre-built for it is to nurture the moment from booking to arrival. And we have a variety of pre-designed messages that do that, which is one of them is our favorite restaurants you should check out. And another one is our favorite hikes you should check out. And here's the thing, it's SaaS. So as soon as you set up the favorites, now it automatically creates these messages. Like you set it up once, and now you have this whole pre-templatized ecosystem of messages that go out, multi-channel. And the whole thing we do too is we get the booker guests to add the rest of the group. And we do that by explaining to the booker guests that it's valuable to them to let everybody else have firsthand information so they don't have to manage the group and they don't have to be in the middle. And we also do an upsell component, and we actually have a wait list for early check-in and late checkout, which is another way to gather marketable contact information. Because if it's like early check-in and late checkout has an opening window and we'll follow back up with you, just give us your information. It's actually something Disney does incredibly well. And my son loves to go to Disney, so I've taken him to some Disney parks. But to see him as a customer.
Did you say you'd work for Disney as well?
I interned with them in pricing strategy, yes, in Hong Kong, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you weren't actually in the parks, though, at that time?
It was corporate.
All right.
Yeah, it was a corporate role.
Yeah, okay. Tell me this Disney strategy that from your son's experience.
You buy magic at Disney. That's ultimately what you do. And the reality is every time they always provide you with enough value that you forget that you're paying an absurd amount of money because they find ways to make it a win-win. And if you even think about, for anyone who's been to a park recently, like you live and die by the app now. You can make reservations at restaurants. You can order food nearby and go pick it up so you don't wait in line. You can see how long the lines are at the rides. You can use your fast passes. Every single thing that they're doing provides value to the guests, but it also is a mousetrap for data because the more they know about you, the better they can service your experience. And they're in the experience business. The more they know about it, what are the ages of the children that you're coming with? What are their names? What are their birth dates? It's the exact same strategy. We're taking that playbook and we're bringing it to this industry.
What I find interesting here is that way back when we started Cottage Link in 2003, it was standard practice when you were talking to guests and you asked for, we had an application form and they had to fill in names, ages of every member of the group. And of course, once we got into the Airbnb era, it's like, oh no, you can't ask that. You can't ask questions of your guests. And that sort of disappeared because we had that information. We had, you've got a couple of kids ages 3 and 4. We can use this information.
It's to have a direct relationship with your guests.
Yeah.
And with the intermediation of the relationship with the guests through distribution channels and the fact that these distribution channels are marketplaces that never want you to get in the way of the marketplace. Yeah. Because if there's too much goodwill built up between the operator and the guest, why would they ever go back to the marketplace? It's by design. And so the less the operator knows about the guest, the better it ends for the distribution channel.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely understand why that's happened. But we are looking to get away from OTA dependence and begin to build that self-reliance or that reliance on your own direct booking website. So coming back to building that information is still so important. So with Lasoh, you talked a bit about retargeting.
Sure.
Are you expecting people to go out and get their first guest from their direct booking site? Or have we gone into, okay, just I give up on direct booking from the start. Let's just bring them in from Airbnb and Vrbo and Booking and we'll just work on the remarketing.
I think they're both really valid strategies. And I think it actually comes down to strategy, right? Because strategy is what you choose to do and what you choose not to do. And so when I think about the functions of a vacation rental operator, the first is literally operating, managing the asset, cleaning it, making sure that the communications and logistics and the maintenance are there, which is asset management. It's not hospitality. The second responsibility is the financial stewardship, which is to the owner if they don't own the asset, which is now the trust accounting component and running a good business. Because if you don't have a tight operation and you're not running a margin that works, nothing else matters. Mm-hmm. But then there's this third capability, and I would refer to as commercial. And I think that's where pricing strategy, revenue management, and marketing all come in. Because at the end of the day, when you start taking on inventory that needs to be matched with guests, there's now a commercial function that needs to be able to do that. Pricing strategy does a great job of increasing conversion rates and maximizing revenue in terms of when demand is low, lowering prices, And when demand is high, raising prices. But that's only one lever. The other entirely different lever is marketing and sales. And those are about generating demand, going out and matching guests to the actual units. And I think it's first and foremost a business strategy to say, are we going to build capabilities within our business that are going to do that, which is a direct-to-consumer strategy versus I would almost call it a almost consumer packaged goods model where you're just B2B and you rely on a distribution channel and all you have is a product, but you don't have a commercial arm. So that's the first question. And if they want to be direct to consumer and they want to know their guests, then they have to have people, systems, and processes to do it. And it's more than a distribution channel. It's a direct booking site. It's probably a solid booking engine, probably a consultant or an in-house person, or at least some software that allows them to gather contact information and then do something about it in terms of driving revenue. So I don't think there's a right answer. They're just different strategies. But if you're going to do it, you got to have a plan and then build capabilities to follow to the plan. I know that didn't very specifically answer your question. I guess my point is you have to know your portfolio. You have to know who you're geographically where you're located. If the portfolio is, I don't know, I'm just going to say Grand Canyon, you might not get a lot of repeat visitors to the Grand Canyon, but you might get a lot of repeat visitors to the Gulf Beach. Mm-hmm. And then there's also this whole other component around how many geographical locations are you in? Because the Grand Canyon guest might be a repeat Vegas customer. And so it's not just about geographical, it's also around your portfolio and what geographies you're in. So I think it's really a strategic exercise on what is the strategy of the business and how do we win and who is our customer, and then should we be direct?
That's such a great take on it, because it's a lot more about actually knowing your business inside and out. And I think for many, it's such a linear thing. I'm just going to start this business and I'm going to rent properties and that will be it. And growth happens. I'm talking from experience because growth just happened to us. And I look back and think I was probably 10 or 15 years in before I really knew my business and did what you were talking about. But it took a long time to really understand maybe that I was actually running a business and not just driving a passion, which I think many people still do. So yes, you did. You did answer my question. I think it's a question I'm asking of a lot of people now, particularly in this whole direct booking thing. I started in 1998. It was when Verbo was vacation rental by owner, and they didn't want anything to do with property management companies. And there was owner direct, and it was a very different landscape. So direct booking was all we did. And those who've come in after Airbnb are seeing it in a very different way. And of course, experiencing it in a different way, because when you were out there in the early 2000s building up a direct book business, you already had it when Airbnb came along. And very different after that to try and backtrack, do something different. So yes, that's a rambling way of saying, yes, you answered my question.
I think part of why this is interesting to me is coming from other industries. I see so much parallel, right? So coming from Victoria's Secret, which is a direct-to-consumer e-commerce and brick-and-mortar business, ultimately, what you and I are talking about right now is distribution. Mm-hmm. And I also worked at Scotts Miracle-Gro. I actually just recorded a Alex and Annie podcast with my old boss. And Scotts Miracle-Gro is a CPG company. It's a manufacturer of goods that sells to a business that then the business sells to the end user. And the customer, in that case, is not the end user. It's the business. And so I think that CPG is super similar to OTA distribution, because the customer, and many operators that are really focused on Airbnb, their customer isn't the guests. Their customer is Airbnb. They want to make sure they're a superhost. They want to make sure that they're focusing on their placement in the e-commerce algorithm. They want to make sure that they're not upsetting anyone from a reviews perspective so that they don't get shut out. That's their customer. When we think about this whole ecosystem, there's three stakeholders. There's the owner of the asset, which is the inventory. There's the distribution channel component, and then there's the guest. The distribution channel component can be third party. It also can be direct. And so that's a lot of stakeholders. And every time you add a stakeholder, the business gets a lot harder to run. But I personally believe that running an incredibly guest-first business results in less reliance on distribution channels and happier owners, because the independent factor is that guests are the ones that are spending money and having their vacation with you, and they're the ones that influence the next batch of guests through reviews and word of mouth and repeat business. And so for me, it's all about guests first. I've actually had a lot of people ask me, why aren't you building an owner CRM? Why are you building owner marketing? And I'm like, I think that problem has been somewhat solved from software in the business already. And I also think that the bigger problem is that the guest is overlooked, and it's the bigger white space.
It's interesting because how do you take the information that comes in from the guest, says, I want this, I want bunk beds, and then pass that on to an owner who is saying, oh no, I'm not having bunk beds anymore, I'm going to separate them. So you are very guest focused, but how does that reconcile against the owners who are putting their feet down and saying, no, that's not the way it's happening. They'll have to take what we give.
I think it comes down to knowing who your customer is and defining your ICP. We do an ICP exercise repeatedly at the business. That's actually one of the meetings I had today. So I'm coming fresh off our ICP refresh. But I think there needs to be a ICP for your owner, and I think there needs to be an ICP for your guest. And so if the guest avatar or profile or ICP is a multi-generational family where you have a mix of ages and a mix of sleeping requirements, and then also a mix of how they're going to engage in the common areas, then your owner ICP might be a home that can handle multiple families or multiple generations. But you can have cohorts. You can say, we service the bachelorette cohort, and these properties are well equipped for them. We service the golf getaway, and these properties are well located. You don't have to have, I think it can be that there's different strategies for different guests and different properties. But if someone takes on an owner and doesn't see a clear path on the value of that home and what guests would be attracted to it, sounds hard to sell to me.
Yeah, it's just, if you've got a number of different, you call them ICPs, we'd call them avatars, personas. If you've got a number of different ones from the guest side. But I like the idea of cohorts, saying, okay, so you've got this particular avatar, ICP, and they will suit these sets of properties. But then you've got to dissuade them from going to one of those properties that are not quite suited to them. It's interesting. I'm just coming at it from a property manager perspective who 100 properties, 200 separate owners that we knew really well. And apart from the fact we did hold a cull every year and took out the ones that would not meet the needs of the changing natures of guests. And that's something that they had to understand, that guest expectations changed so much. Every year, the guest expectation changed. So they had to.
But even what you just said right now, and I'm sorry I interrupted you, I'm just really excited about what you just said, is how many operators are actually evaluating the owners that they serve and saying, I actually could choose not to work with someone that is actually maybe taking up disproportionately more of my time than anyone else and is draining resources from my business. But I actually don't have to work with them. I actually think that there's a whole cohort of people that are not even going through that exercise. They think that they have to service everyone and all people. And another strategy tenet is you can't be all things to all people. You have to decide where you're going to play.
Yeah, we used to get so excited. It happened around mid-September every year, or we'd have our end of season lunch and then we'd have the cull. And that's where we went through all the properties and owners and say, okay, they're going. They were rude. They didn't replace things that we told them they should replace. And we did that for a few years before we realized, hold on a second, this is giving us information that we should use at the beginning of the cycle, not at the end.
To set expectations.
Yes.
To set a protocol.
So it got us turning around saying, okay, these are the owners that we want and these are the ones that we don't. And the owners that we want are the ones that we can say, hey, guest expectations have changed. This is what they're looking for now. And they go, oh, what can we do? What can we do to make these people happy? I think we grew up in our neck of the woods with some owners they'd been around for 20 years or so, renting their own properties, and their view was, it's a cottage, who cares? They're coming for the water, they're not coming for the house. And that was a really hard nut to crack in the early days. But I think nowadays we can say, with the help of software that like you are producing, we can give them data that says this is what your guests are now looking for. Can you provide it? If not, let's work out a way of helping you do so. Or maybe it is, we no longer wish to work with you because you can't.
It's not a fit.
It's not a fit. You just can't meet the guest expectations.
And I think that data is so important, right? Because it's very easy to tell a story to an owner when there's an average. And if their property is falling significantly below the average, whether it's an occupancy rate or the rate it's able to command per night or even satisfaction score, there are very clear performance indicators, KPIs, that can be used to score the portfolio of properties. And that's a very fact-driven way, because going back to facts versus emotions, which has really been the theme so much of this conversation, is most people are going to get emotional about their property. It's why realtors exist. I just sold my home, and thank God we had a realtor, right? Because things got weird at the end. You have to have someone not being emotional about the thing.
Yeah. Oh, don't take me down that road of selling properties and buying them and emotions. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a real estate transaction that has actually gone really smoothly end to end. Anyway, this has been a fantastic conversation and I'd love to continue it, but I'm respectful of your time and don't want to overrun. I love the whole idea of Lasoh.I, and I will, of course, put a link to it in the show notes. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we part company today?
It's really important for me that we're building this business with the industry. And I've shared a lot of opinions. I have many opinions loosely held, right? Until somebody else convinces me that there's a smarter point of view. And then I always will listen, open-minded. And so the point I'm making is that we really want to work with the industry and build to the needs of the industry. And I know that's a really large friction point where a lot of software companies come in, they think they know everything. Just because I worked in corporate marketing doesn't mean I know everything about vacation rental marketing. And so I want to make sure I'm solving the problems of my customers, which are operators of vacation rentals. And so I would encourage anyone, if they disagree with me, to actually tell me why. Yeah. And I would also love to hear from folks what pain points they have and what they wish existed, because we don't want to build in a vacuum. That's even why we've started a founding membership program where we're working very closely with a small number of select founding members, giving them incredible pricing, because we want to build to the industry, not just my opinions. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to call that out because I think it's distinct. It's very important for us to be collaborative and solve our customers' problems and not just come in and think we know what we're doing and that we're saving everyone.
I think I see that so many times. I see it when I get a lot of pitch decks and I look at them and I think, what is this problem you're solving? Have you actually talked to anybody who is dealing with these issues on a day-to-day basis? Somebody who's wearing every single hat in this industry. Have you talked to them? And so I love to hear that. I also got from our first conversation, you like to be pushed back. You like
100%. I think I say it all the time, diamonds are made under pressure with the team. I only want to surround myself with people that are really smart, that we get to the best outcome through smart debate. Just because I have an opinion doesn't mean I'm right. Let's debate it. Probably that's the lawyer in me, right?
Oh, yes. My sister's family are all lawyers, and dinner times with them.
It's probably stressful.
It is a little. I just sit there nice and quiet in the corner, let them argue it all out. Orlie, it's been absolutely fantastic having you here and having this conversation. So for all of those who said, get in touch with Orlie, she needs to be a guest, thank you. I don't think this will be the end of a conversation. I wish I had this product when I started growing my company and realized I couldn't ask everybody about fishing or bunk beds. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun.
What an awesome conversation. I go into these conversations sometimes and I have questions, and I might have sent the guest a list of questions, because often people do want some idea of what we're going to be talking about. On this occasion, when I spoke to Orlie a few weeks ago, and she said, don't send me questions. She said, let's have a conversation. So let's just have some themes. So I put together some themes that we might explore, sent that. We didn't cover any of them. These are the sorts of conversations that I really love. We had no real intention of talking about Orlie's software that she's developing. But when I started into that, and I thought, oh my gosh, I would have loved to have had this when I was managing my company, because knowing the guest and nurturing that guest relationship is probably one of the most powerful things that you can do in this business. Yeah, I know revenue management and getting operations right and making sure your Airbnb listing is optimized. Okay, I do understand that these are important things. But when it comes down to it, it's the guest. You are creating a dream, and the better you can create that dream means the better vacation they're going to have, the better the experience they're going to have, and the more likely they are not only to come back to you, whether it's in your location or if you have multiple locations, then maybe they'll try another one, but they'll also tell their friends about it. And word of mouth is pretty powerful too. So go take a look at Lasoh.io and see what the software does. And if you've got any questions, get in touch with Orlie. I'll make sure her credentials, her profile, in LinkedIn profile, etc., is on the show notes. And have a conversation with her. See what she can do for you. Okay, as ever, thank you for listening. Thank you for dropping in and for spending some time with me. It's always great to know there is somebody at the other end of this microphone. See you soon. It's been a pleasure as ever being with you. If there's anything you'd like to comment on, then join the conversation on the show notes for the episode at vacationrentalformula.com. We'd love to hear from you, and I look forward to being with you again next week.